Hey guys, so for whoever's watching this video, I got a request to talk about how the project is organized in the sense of which repos kind of depend on what, and also there's kind of like a nomenclature that I kind of wanted to talk about. So um, this video here, just kind of short and sweet, just talking about how the repos are organized and what their purposes are. Now, that being said, in the future, it might be new repos that show up and they should be applied here. So let's just kind of focus on the first part, the URL. So if ever you want to get a hold of this document, it's just located here, aes-outreach.github.io/outreach-wiki pages and then build dependency.html. So here we have an HTML page that just kind of talks about different repos that we have. And these repos here can be found on our GitHub page. You'll need access, of course, if you need to be part of the team, but once you're part of the team, you'll just see these. So this here kind of shows you the build dependency in the sense that which repos have to go in first in order for them, in order for the whole system to be released successfully. So let's kind of walk through this quickly. So Outreach Pojo, what is that? So Outreach Pojo is essentially the repo that has all of our reusable server functions. It has date comparisons. It has the ability to transform JSON, to search through JSON. Everything we do in our project is JSON based. So a lot of emphasis on JSON helpers and a lot of emphasis on, just to say, reusable code in the sense of the ability to read streams, close streams successfully, and whatnot. And the project is fairly well broken apart, and each package is kind of responsible for a specific task. The next one is data source module. So that one here is our DAO. It's essentially our repo that's in charge of talking to the database. It uses a connection pool, which grabs, I think at first, like 30 or 50 connections to the database and keeps them open and allows us to perform almost any type of SQL query that we want to against the database. Note here that our database is a Postgres database, and this repo could easily be extended to actually take in a connection to any database whatsoever. The next one is JEasy Flows OSGI. So it's a clone of a repository on GitHub known as JEasy Flows. I added the word OSGI on it because everything we do is OSGI based. And what this does is allows us to take all of our other repos that I'll be talking about and essentially write these reusable work item steps, like logging in, making sure you're authenticated, making sure you have permissions to actually perform a certain action, whatnot. So that here is essentially the core library of writing or owning these workflows is happening in here, and it uses Pojo as well. So it actually uses some of the functionality that Outreach Pojo exposes, as well as the data source module. Entities is the next one. That's one is pretty much any drop down is stored in here because these drop downs are going to be reused everywhere. So entities is just a repository that exports the ability to retrieve public facing data and even data that is not public facing, but at the end of the day can still be seen easily. It doesn't allow the ability to create anything within the database. It's purely just a read-only operation. Business rules is the repo that is used to configure our entire server. So here, business rules by default has all of the course configurations inside of it. It also has error pages defined within it and a bunch of other stuff. The login module is the next one, which it manages the login and the authentication of the user. Again, it uses the previous repos above it to maintain it itself. At this point now, the repos that follow up to the ng repos are essentially interchangeable in how they're ordered. So UAuto API, sysadmin, and forms are essentially all interchangeable in regards to the build order. But I just put it this way, just for preference. So UAuto API, what does that do? It's simply put, it manages the connections to the University of Ottawa PeopleSoft server. So we can actually retrieve student information using this repository. The next one is sysadmin. So sysadmin is a repository that exposes all the server-side APIs that the sysadmin app uses to display user data. The next one is the Forms app, which is used to expose, or actually exposes all the APIs needed to essentially create form data, in the sense that it is used to expose APIs that when forms submit data, they go through this code base here. And essentially all of our forms are going to be stored in, all of our form APIs are going to be stored inside of this repository. So as you can see here, from entities to Pojo, that's essentially like our basic stack. And then these repos here piggyback off of those self-built libraries. The next three are our front-end facing repos. So ng-helper, ng-apps, and ng-forms. So ng-helper is this reusable repo that ng-apps and ng-forms uses. They're all of our services that make web requests to our back-facing APIs. These are stored all on GitHub and essentially compiled down to a library that we then use inside of ng-apps and ng-forms. ng-apps and ng-forms are actual web apps. And the reason why they're prefaced with ng is because they're written with Angular. And just to kind of respect the naming structure that Angular uses. And lastly, we have these last two. Outreach Vagrant, which is the entire repository that stores all of our repos and actually runs them. So actually all these repos get pulled together inside of Outreach Vagrant and deploys our application server. And Outreach Ansible is the one that actually manages recreating these servers. So Outreach Ansible will actually has the code to destroy the server and bring it back up. Now, most of the development will happen between ng-forms, apps, helper, and so on and so forth. Most developers don't touch the Ansible repos, since that one kind of manages the code deployment. But I hope that kind of gives you a bit of a breakdown as to how our repos are organized and essentially how they relate together with their purposes. Cool. Thank you, and see you next time.